My name is Sal DiVincenzo. I am a business librarian here at the Miller Business Center. And again, I am also one of the co-hosts of the Middle Country Public Library podcast. And I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Business Bites. This is a program that we do regularly, maybe every 6 months or so, because we get a lot of feedback on it, and people want us to do this and do this program more regularly. It is somewhat of an evolving industry, let's just say. It's definitely growing. And as a small business owner, you should definitely take advantage of everything that we talk about today regarding podcasting to market your small business. So I'm going to go to full screen here with the presentation, and hopefully everybody will see that. And again, I will have the chat here. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And here we go. So you have an idea for a podcast. I'm sure everybody here, I hope, listens to podcasts. More than 50% of the US population last year listened to a podcast. If you were to look at the statistics, the growth has been exponential. Podcasting is big. Podcasting is just not audio, it's also video. So we're going to talk about some of that. And what I'm really going to focus on is just basically two things. I'm going to focus on your the resources that you'll need to start a podcast, to record a podcast, to get something, to get your content out there. And then I'll talk about how you can use your podcast to market your small business. Okay. So there are some questions that you need to ask yourself before you even get into the equipment. And there's a potential money investment here. Doesn't have to be. I'll tell you that right off the bat. Does not have to be. There's a potential money investment if you want to keep going with this and make it more professional, more regular. And there is also a time investment as well. So as small business owners, time is just as valuable as money. We're going out there, we're making sales or trying to, come up with ideas to make sales. So you get involved in a podcast, especially if it's a weekly podcast, that's going to take up some of your time. So there's different questions that you have to ask yourself. How can a podcast benefit my business, and is it appropriate? Okay. If, it might not necessarily be appropriate for your business. I have to say, thinking about it, 9 times out of 10, it probably is going to help you in one way or another. Okay. Even if you did a monthly podcast, like once a month, just to let people know that you're out there, regardless of what type of business you are, it's an advertisement for you. But some things might just not work out. It might not translate well audio, if that's what you want to do. And if it translates only in the video aspect, and you can't take the audio, you can't strip that audio out of the video and distribute it that way, it might not work. So you want to ask yourself, am I willing to invest the time and money into producing a podcast? Okay. It takes time. I'll tell you from my experience, we do here at the library, we do a 20 to 25 minute show, a 20 to 25 minute show from start to finish. This includes recording and production and all the back end work, maybe an hour to an hour and a half worth of actual work per week. And that doesn't include the other things that my co-hosts do, which is, talk to people about interviews and, so scheduling interviews and coming up with subjects and doing the prep work for the show. So some things you have to, take into consideration in that respect. What is my potential return on investment? Will I spend more than I could potentially make? Okay. Now, like I said, you can do something simple with what you already have. If you have a little computer experience, that might help. Okay. But are you throwing all your marketing money into a podcast and you're not getting that return. You're not getting subscribers. You're not getting people listening. Frankly, if it's not working out, you should stop. Okay. Because there's other ways that you can make money. There's other ways that you can market your business. This is just one little aspect. So you have to think about that. And also, can I easily identify my potential audience? If you go into this not knowing who your audience is, if you go into this not knowing how you're going to present this podcast and how it's going to connect with your business, then that struggle is going to be very evident to anybody who listens. And you definitely don't want to do that, because you don't want to turn off your potential audience, and you don't want to necessarily attract folks who are going to listen to your podcast just for the sake of listening to it and not doing business with you. Okay. Which is, look, it's great that people are interested in, listening to, your photography business, or, the fact that you sell muffins or something like that. But if they don't come down and they're not, buying from you, or if you're not offering them something for there to be that exchange there, then it really, it's probably not worth doing, or you need to rethink your approach to your podcast. So these are the things you have to think about. Okay. What will your show be about? Define the subject and the scope, and start simple. Okay. And again, I'm going to go back to the library podcast because I've been doing it for many years now. So initially, our scope was very simple. We wanted a podcast that went up once a week, maybe 15, 20 minutes, where we talked about what was coming in the future at the library, future programming, what resources folks can use. It's geared towards our patrons. Okay. So you have to think, okay, who's this podcast geared towards? It's geared towards my potential customers. Okay. This is what I do. This is my service. This is my product. I want to reach out to these people. Okay. But I want to keep it nice and simple. All right. Just at the start. Okay. So maybe we're not doing interviews right up front. Okay. Maybe we're not doing a video podcast as the component. We're just, maybe having a 10-minute podcast. This is what I'd like to talk about this week. This is how I can help you. Please give me a call. That kind of thing. All right. And then we as we start to build our audience, as we start to get more confident with using equipment, with doing recording, with hearing our voices and all this kind of stuff, then we can start to evolve. And that's definitely what we did here. And that's something that you should think about. And you also want to think about the format and the length and the tone. Okay. Is this an interview show? It could be that's all you could do. And there's a lot of very popular business podcasts out there that's all it is. It's just interviews. Every single week it's an interview. And at the end of the interview, it gets tied into what this person does. Is it conversational? Is it solo? Is it storytelling? Is it going to be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? Now, if you're going to do a podcast, especially an audio podcast, I definitely suggest at a minimum monthly. Okay. People are very fickle. And since there's so much competition out there for your ear, for their ears, and for your mouth to tell them stuff, you definitely want to stay fresh. And if it's monthly, that doesn't mean that you're recording once a month necessarily. It means that maybe you're recording a show, maybe you're recording 2 or 3 shows in 1 week, and then you're spreading that out over 3 months. Okay. Or you could do weekly or bi-weekly, whatever you're comfortable with. All I'll tell you right up front is that make sure you have at least 2 to 3 episodes ready to go before you hit that publish button. Okay. Because if you hook people in the first 2 episodes and then there's nothing for them to listen to for a month or 2 months, you're going to lose them. It happens that quickly. Is your show going to be educational? Is it going to be entertainment? A combination, which I personally like. Is it going to be instructional? Okay. Is it going to be short subject or long form? Okay. So I like to think, what's the average commute time on Long Island? I think it's 32 minutes the last time I checked, between 28 and 32 minutes. So do you want your show to fit in the one commute from home to work? Or do you want your listener to have to listen to part 2 on their way home, or in many cases, the biggest, frankly, the biggest podcast right now out there, the number one podcast is a long form podcast. It's Joe Rogan. Guy does over 2 hours of talk, okay, in one show. Is that what you want to do? I don't know. I think for small business owners, to be frank, I think a nice podcast that falls in that 28 to 32 minutes as the max is a good target to start. Again, we mentioned audience. Who is your audience and what is your goal? We all know what our goal is, right? For a small business owner, we want to build sales. Okay, we want to drive our audience to click on a link, to visit our website, to interact with us on our Facebook page or our social networking, or to give us a call. That's what we want. That's the goal. Okay. And marketing. How will you market your podcast? I'm going to show you some marketing ideas later, but this is something that you have to think about. Okay. Because it's not just, and this is a challenge that we have, it's not just putting on a really great show. You can have, a fantastic podcast. If no one's listening, if no one knows about it, it's really, it's, I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but it's really, it's not to your benefit. So let's learn about the lingo. Okay. Let's learn about some of the lingo. I broke this down. This is something I adjusted for this version of the presentation. I broke this down into 3 parts because these are the 3 things that you need to do to produce your podcast. You need to capture your content, record it. Okay. You need to edit and produce your show, and you need to publish it and distribute it. That's it. That's the 3 parts of it. Now, within these 3 parts, it could get a little complicated, and I'm going to go over those 3 parts with you. Okay. So to capture our content, there's recording equipment. Okay. So you're going to hear words like the microphone, the mixing board, and all-in-one. Okay. Right here behind me, I have the Rodecaster Pro, which is our podcasting. I'm in the podcast studio. This is our podcasting recording equipment. We have it running into our computer. I'm using my Heil PR40 microphone, professional microphone with a spit guard on it, pop guard. And everything is going through, you're hearing my voice through our board here. Okay. This is an all-in-one. I can take this and I can bring it on location. I can bring it to another room. As long as I have the microphones, the headphones, and this board, I can record my podcast right on here. There's a internal SD card that records everything. So that's one type of recording system. Okay. I also have here a smartphone, because believe it or not, if you have a smartphone, if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, you can most definitely record a podcast. Absolutely. Is it going to sound spectacular? No. Does it have to sound spectacular? Not necessarily. If what you're talking about and what you're presenting is worth it to your listener and you market it right, then it isn't. It isn't a problem. And frankly, it's a starting point, because once you build your audience, hopefully you're going to make a couple sales. You'll be able to afford maybe a nice microphone or a mixing board or an all-in-one or one of these other things. Okay. So capturing your content in its simplest form is a microphone. So you can get a USB microphone, for example. They run under $100. They're, a mic with a USB cord, plug it into your computer, and you're ready to go. You will need this second part here if you do that, which is the DAW, the Digital Audio Workstation. That will allow you to edit and produce your show. Okay. And it also does the recording part as well, if you're using a computer to record. So you hit record on the computer, you start talking into your microphone, your USB microphone, you do the whole thing. Maybe you want to add some music. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You're going to do this all from this software. Okay. There is free digital audio workstation software out there. So if you already have a computer, you're almost there. Okay. If you have a computer, you get yourself a microphone, you're good to go. And again, I say under $100, you can probably get a decent USB mic for $49.99. Okay, so your upfront investment cost, if you already have a computer and you're willing to download a free piece of software and learn it, because it's going to be a little clunky, but learn it, you could do this. If you already have a Mac computer, I will say this: if you have a Mac and Apple computer, you already have your podcasting software built in. It's called GarageBand. You can use that for your podcast. And finally, hosting and feed management. Now, at the end of the day, this is where most of your cost is going to be. Okay, is in the publishing and distribution part of it. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a moment, because after you create your wonderful podcast, you're going to want to put it up on the net for people to download. Okay, and you need a means of distributing it to all the different services. And in most cases, there is, if not all cases, unless you have your own website and you're already paying for web hosting, there's going to be a cost involved. So we mentioned recording equipment before. You can use a phone. You can use a USB microphone. There's the Rodecaster Pro. You can even get one of these all-in-one Tascam units here, where it's a stereo microphone. It saves to an SD card. And then you'll take that SD card and put it into your computer to edit it, or you'd plug the Tascam or whatever it is, the Roland, whatever Zoom mic, whatever, into the computer, and then download that as well. So this is, you can see it's very small. A lot of podcasters use this for their remote recording, but these are all things that you can use to record your voice and add it to your podcast and edit it in there. I'll tell you, at the library, for the library podcast, we've recorded a complete episode at the airport on our way back from a conference using my iPhone. I uploaded the files to my laptop. I edited the show on the flight home. And by the time I landed, I had a full, complete episode ready to go when we landed. So it is all possible to do something like that with an iPhone. So I mentioned software. So now for software, you're going to need a digital audio workstation, a DAW, DAW. And these are just some names that I put out there. Some you might recognize. If you are a Mac person, you already have GarageBand. If you want to upgrade to something more robust, you'll have something like Logic Pro. There's a cost involved there. It's about $300. If you have a Windows machine, I suggest the free open source DAW Audacity, which is there on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, Audacity, while a fantastic free digital audio workstation, there's a bit of a learning curve there. It's not as consumer friendly and plug and play as GarageBand is. Apple does a good job at that. Hindenburg is what we use here at the library. Twisterwave is another one. These are all software packages, and I suggest that you go out and do your research. But if you need to get started, if you want to get started with no cost involved, if you have a Mac, use GarageBand, and if you have Windows, use Audacity. And again, if you have any questions about those, you can always email me, DiVincenzoSalvatore@mcplibrary.org, and I'd be happy to answer any questions specifically about those software. But you need the software because you need to edit your podcast. Now, for remote recording, which in a pandemic came in very handy, you have other choices as well. Some of these free, some of these not. If you already have, like I said, if you already have the Apple software, you can record audio off of FaceTime. Skype, I believe, one-on-one is probably, there's no cost there. Zoom, Squadcast, there is a cost involved. We use Squadcast here. We used it extensively during the shutdown. We were able to continue our podcast during the shutdown using Squadcast. I'll show you a screenshot in a moment. Clean Feed, Google Meet, you'll recognize Google Meet. These are all online services where you see the person on the other end. You can see them, and you can record the audio from that. And I'm going to mention how this comes in handy later on for expanding your content distribution. So for remote recording, you'll see on the left-hand side, high quality audio with individual tracks. This is Squadcast. This is what we use. This is going to run you about $200 a year. But what's great about this is that it looks like Zoom. It acts like Zoom. You can invite people to join you. You can do up to 4 folks at the same time. But what's really unique about Squadcast is it records high quality audio in separate tracks. So, in this case, Elizabeth, Alex, and I were recording an episode of the Miller Center podcast. We were all home, and each individual track is saved locally on the person's drive, on the local drive, and then it's uploaded to the cloud. So, and this happened with our podcast. So if the dog starts barking in the background, I can mute Elizabeth and keep going with the show. It also allows us to adjust audio, work with it a little more. It's a very robust software solution for you for online remote recording. Or in this case, so right now, everything that I'm saying here on Zoom is being recorded both video and audio. So you can record audio straight from your meeting with a service like Zoom. And in this case, if you're interviewing someone, and there might be a cost involved, if you're interviewing someone on Zoom, you're seeing them, you're doing the interview, and that audio is being recorded as well. So you can take that MP3 file and then bring it into your digital audio workstation and create your podcast. So from a remote standpoint, this is a great opportunity to record. And if you want, you can also, and I'll show you later, we've used the video portion of this as well as a video podcast. So the video podcast, cross-platform content is now king. Okay. So in addition to recording the audio, folks are now taking advantage of the fact that you can record the video as well, both independently and concurrently while you're recording, and then post that to YouTube or Vimeo or whatever video host you're using. And while, if you can see in these pictures, the simple one is this gentleman with the microphone in front of his Mac is just recording probably with his webcam, like I'm recording with my webcam. You can do that as a podcast. Take that audio, put it on your audio podcast, take this video, put it on YouTube or Vimeo, and there you go. You have both formats, content is cross-platform now. You can do that. Okay. If you're comfortable being on screen, there you go. You're done. So if people want to watch you on YouTube, they can. If they want to listen to you in the car on Apple Podcasts, they can. Then you get something that's a little fancier here on the right-hand side of the screen. These guys are going crazy here. They got multiple high-definition cameras here. And it looks like they got 3 shots. So when each person talks, they're on screen. You can do that as well. More power to you if you can do that. But if you have a DSLR, if you have a digital camera, if you have an iPhone, if you have any video camera, you can, why not? You can do that. There is extra software involved, though, and there's going to be an extra cost, because not only are you editing, if you wanted to edit, if you want to look really professional, not only are you editing the audio, but the video as well. So think about that. I suggest if you're going to do it this way, if you're going from video and audio, record the video, make the video the primary source, make the video your primary production focus. And then when you're done with the production of the video, then just take that audio and then render it out and post that to the publishers. So go in that direction. And we can't all be Joe Rogan or have his money. But this guy obviously, is the number 1 podcaster right now, $1 million, multi-million dollars, and he's got the whole setup there. So, all right. So how do I publish? Okay. So we've recorded our podcast let's say we've recorded our podcast on our phones. Okay. And then we have a Mac. So we take the podcast on the phone, we airdrop it onto our Mac. We take the audio, we open up GarageBand. We had a little music at the beginning that we've legally obtained we have our podcast. We put a little music at the end. We got nice little bumpers. Maybe add a little ad in the middle for what we do and our services and how we can help you be a better, better business person, whatnot. Now that we're done, we want to publish. How does that happen? Well, I wish I could say it's just as easy as, hitting a button for free, but it's not. There are different options. Most podcast distributors do not host your audio files. Okay. And the reason why I say most is because companies like Spotify or iHeartRadio, their own productions are hosted on their servers. Okay. And then distributed out. But your podcast is not going to be on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Amazon Podcasts. They do not have your file. You have your file. You're going to have your file either on your web server or on a podcast host server. It's going to be somewhere. Those distributors just have a directory. Okay. They're simply directories. So they simply have a listing of the podcasts, the descriptions of the podcasts. And when you click on that podcast and download it, it's going somewhere else to grab it. So you'll need to host your audio with a hosting provider or use a web hosting provider. Now, here's the good news. If you already have a website and you already have web space and you already have storage space on your website, then you are halfway to being able to host your podcast on your website, with the caveat that anytime someone downloads your podcast, and a lot of people subscribe to podcasts, so it's automatic. Okay. So it's going to happen no matter what. If they listen to it or not, it's going to download. You must understand that counts towards your traffic on your website. If you have unlimited traffic, or if you have 50 gigabytes or something ridiculous like that, you're not going to have an issue. But if you have the smallest package on your web hosting, you want to consider, okay, do I really want to do this, or do I want to go with a podcast host that's dedicated to my show? Podcasts are distributed by RSS, with really simple syndication is the lingo that they use for RSS. So it's a file that tells the directories, this is the name of the podcast, this is what the podcast is about, this is the description of this episode, and this is where it's sitting somewhere on the internet, that the address. Okay, that's what it is. So using a podcast hosting company may incur a cost, but in many cases, it will be a turnkey situation. You log in, you upload your produced podcast, you hit post, and it's done, like Facebook. Okay. You go in, you fill out some information. It's very screen consumer friendly. You hit a button, and it gets posted and distributed across all those different podcast distributors, Apple, Google, so on and so forth. That is the cost component here with the hosting. But it is super convenient and super easy to do it that way. You don't have to do it that way, but it is the recommended way doing it. What does an RSS feed look like? This is what it looks like. Okay. This is from the NASA podcast. You can see you do have to be somewhat of a computer comfortable with doing computer programming, specifically if you've done XML, HTML programming. This is what it looks like. When we first started the podcast here at the library, this is what I was doing. Now, I came from a web designer background, so I was comfortable doing this. A lot of it was copying and pasting, to be frank. I wasn't necessarily doing custom RSS here, XML here. I was copying and pasting based on what Apple was telling me I needed to have. Okay, you need to check the boxes with a lot of these distributors. They want to make this file needs to be pristine in order for it to work right. So this is what this particular one looks like. What you're seeing here is the Friday, April 12th, 2019 episode of NASA Image of the Day. Okay. This is what it looks like with a podcasting host. This is Podbean. This is what we use here at the library. Okay. It's as simple as logging into your account, clicking publish episode, choose a file to upload. The file name is there. We put the title here. We put the description. It's a blog format on the Podbean site. So we can add, text, we can add show notes. We can put all sorts of great things on here. Hit publish, hit schedule. We can also schedule it. Put the artwork here, and you're done. There it is. And you can see the marketing aspect is built in. The distribution aspect is built in here. Podbean, if you tell them to, will get your podcast out to Apple and Google and Amazon and YouTube and WordPress and LinkedIn and blah, 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 blah. All those places. Okay. They even have embeddable players, which is on the bottom left-hand corner here. So you can embed this into your website. So when people go to your website on the bottom of the homepage, your latest episode is there and you can click play and listen to it right in the web browser. Fantastic. Okay. Cost involved. All right. We here at the center, we love to talk about things that don't cost a small business owner, because we already have the challenge as a small business owner of overhead and costs and the cost of doing business. However, I will say, frankly, this is, somewhat affordable. Okay. If you shop around, these are the podcast hosting companies, the bigger ones. Okay. Podbean, Blueberry, Libsyn, Spreaker, the self-hosted route, which means that you have to have an RSS feed and send that feed to everything. Again, if you're just getting started, I recommend not doing it that way. But if you have a internet web designer savvy person and you have unlimited traffic or very high traffic, traffic high value of traffic ability, so you can do multiple gigabytes a month, and you have someone who's comfortable programming XML, more power to you. You can do the self-hosting option if you already have a website. But, if you're going to do Podbean, if you're going to do one of these places, you're looking at an average of $19 per month, or as low as $9 per month if you do something like the basic Podbean or the basic, Blueberry might be a little more expensive, but you're in that range, $9, $10, $11 a month. Not terrible, not awful, not great. But I think if you're going to invest the time, if you're going to buy some equipment to do a podcast, if this is really something you want to do to market your business, I think it's worth it. I think you will get at least the return. We hope you'll get at least the return of $9, at least one sale. Okay. For one month's worth of episodes. But wait, there's more. Because it's not just that. It's not just the recording. It's not just the editing. It's not just the hosting. It's your commitment, your time, and your money. You have to be committed to this. Okay. We know personally that things get in the way. Life gets in the way. Other business gets in the way. And it's tough. It's tough to, I am blessed to have fabulous colleagues and co-hosts and an understanding administration that gives us the time every week to spend an hour and a half to produce a 25-minute show. It's really remarkable. So you have to have that. You have to be patient. You have to learn things that you might be uncomfortable learning. You have to do things you might be uncomfortable doing, putting yourself out there. But if you can do it, you can really make yourself a really nice podcast. Your logo and your branding is another thing. You look at, go to the Spotify browse screen, go to the Amazon podcast browse screen or Apple, look at the logos. Okay. That's a little part of it. People see a really cool logo. They're going to want, it jumps out at you. They might click on it. Okay. Think about your music licensing. Music is not free. Okay. Unless you create it yourself, which we've done here in-house. We've done some music composition ourselves, but we do license our music. So our music on our latest theme song for our podcast is licensed. We pay a licensing fee to put that on our show, and it's we don't have to pay royalty, but we do have to pay the licensing. So you have to think about that. Okay, or you can go to Creative Commons with attribution. You can have your theme song or music, as long as you attribute it to the composer, they'll let you use it for free. So that's stuff you have to think about. Also, fair use. If you're going to talk about something in an educational aspect, and this is something legally you should do your due diligence on, You can use like a snippet of a movie or a snippet of a song or a snippet of an interview, as long again as you do attribution, as long as you cross your T's and dot your I's, you can use it fairly without getting in trouble. You have to think about stuff like that, and also legal considerations. So if you are going to interview someone on your show, okay, do you have them sign a boilerplate contract that basically says we can use your likeness and we can use your voice, indefinitely without them expecting any compensation? Okay, things you have to think about if you're going to get that deep into it. It's important, and it's just a little tiny piece of the big picture, but you got to think about it. So let's take an example. Let's say we're going to write an episode. And I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the time here. We got about 20 minutes left. So let's get into this. So you write your episode outline and you write any copy that's important to you and your audience. So, if you're going to get on mic and you're going to do this like freestyle, if there's something you need to say by the end of 20 minutes or 25 minutes, which in many cases is, don't forget to reach out to us. We can help you with your whatever landscaping. We can help you with your, business development. We can help you with your job coaching. Make sure it's in your copy. Make sure you get to it before the end of that 20 minutes, because you can get caught up in everything. And then you realize, I forgot the whole point of this. I was having so much fun. Schedule your time accordingly as well, because again, the recording and the editing part of it, recording is easy. It's the editing that requires some patience and some time. And if you have guests, be upfront with what will be discussed. Whenever we have guests, we send them the questions ahead of time, so they're prepared. You want to make them comfortable. You want to explain the process. Say, listen, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to get on the air. I'm going to say, hey, welcome to the show. I'm going to introduce you. I'm going to do a little spiel. I might do a live read of, quote unquote, a live read of an ad about my business. And then I'm going to go into question number one. Make sure they know what to expect, that they're not getting kind of thrown into it with not having an idea of how the process works or how your show is. And if they're remote, make sure that their equipment is up to date, working, and compatible. Whenever we do, most of our interviews are telephone interviews. So we make the telephone call. It goes all through the board. It's very simple for us on our end. But if you're doing a Squadcast, if you're doing a Zoom, you might want to maybe meet up like 15, 20 minutes before your actual recording time and just test everything out. Do it a day or two before. Send the person you're interviewing like maybe a one sheet that says, okay, in addition to your questions, please make sure you have headphones so there's no feedback. Make sure you have a decent mic, all that kind of stuff. All right. And they are your first advertisers. The people you're interviewing. Make sure they let people know that they're on your show. I will tell you, all of our highly rated / top downloaded shows at the library are shows where we've interviewed people and they've gone out on their social media and they've advertised them being on our show. Very simple way of doing it. Very simple way of getting the word out on your, how you can build your business. It's super simple and it works wonders to your feed. So, we had a local legislator on our show 2 years ago. We had easily the highest number of downloads imaginable for us. Huge audience bump just for that show. So it's definitely get the word out. Let them get the word out. Let them tell people that they're going to be on your show. Okay. Also, make sure that you practice the following things. You should know your equipment. You should learn and get used to speaking into the microphone. Consider using a boom mic. So this way you're not banging on it during the recording. We tend to like bang on the table sometimes when we get excited on our podcast because we have the booms and because we have the shock absorbers here. Takes that away. Makes it much easier to edit your show. And recording locations. Location. I am in a former closet. A great podcast studio, I got to tell you, because there's no windows, there's no air conditioning. There's some lights and a door, and that's it. And we're in the corner of the of the floor here at the upstairs in the staff area. So it's a great spot. It's nice and quiet, has little or no ambient sound. So if you can find a place for that, that's great. You want to avoid items that cause sound issues. So rustling papers, banging on the table, squeaky chairs. I mentioned that before. If you're going to read a script, instead of having your pages stapled or, I like to spread them out. So this way everything's out. There's no sound of you moving papers around, which is great. And show prep is important. Boy, would our podcast sound spectacularly professional if we did more show prep instead of us on our podcast saying and well, let me look into that. We take a lot of that out. I take a lot of that out in the post-production. I'm a very good remover of ums. But if you're prepared and you know what you want to say, we don't use a script. But if you do use a script, obviously make it sound as natural as possible, but you'll sound more professional if you're following a script. So I mentioned the Middle Country Public Library podcast. We're a weekly podcast meant to educate and entertain listeners with all the wonderful things that we have to offer here at Middle Country Public Library. It's a co-hosted, conversational, segmented show. Our average show length is 20 minutes, and we have new episodes posted every Thursday. We started out very simple and worked our way up to more sophisticated equipment. We initially used microphones and a mixing board that we had here for programming. So it was like, when we had programs and we had people in front of an audience and they were using the microphone like a DJ microphone, we actually used that to start our podcast. And if you listen to episodes 1 through 56, which was the first year, you're going to definitely hear the difference in the quality of the show and the feedback and the hissing and the electrical sounds and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't, and we were using Audacity. So you're going to hear all that compared to when we went down to a conference and we were educated on what equipment we can have that was within our budget. And we came back and we got that equipment and now we're using that equipment. The difference was night and day. Okay. So we moved up to more sophisticated equipment. This is a quick picture of us in this room here. Sarah Fade on the left there, myself and Nicole Rambo, my fabulous colleagues who join me every week to do this thing. And again, that's our Rodecaster. And at the time we were using a Mac laptop. We are now, what I'm speaking to you on that right now is a iMac. It's the bigger Mac, and I prefer Macs over PCs. It's just my thing. You do not have to have a Mac. You can definitely use a PC. So we evolved into more community-based subjects. So our first year was mostly about what's happening at the library. And then after that, we started bringing people in to do interviews. We started talking about movies. We have these things called movie chats, where approximately once a month, we'll pick a movie that's available for our patrons to take out, and we'll talk about the movie, whether or not we liked it or not. Those are usually the more entertaining episodes. And then, we're starting to focus on things that are happening in our community. And again, the reason for this is to build our audience outside of our primary audience. And that's something you want to think about as well. So if you're Long Island based, that's great. If you're focusing on people in the town of Brookhaven, that's fantastic. But we always want you to expand. We want you to be successful in your small business. So again, start simple. We mentioned it at the beginning. Start simple and then work your way up to something more. Use your podcast as a means of educating and entertaining your listeners while at the same time marketing your business. So this is how you do it. So you're going to build your audience by social networking. If you have social networking, if you have Twitter, Facebook, you want to say on there, come listen to my podcast. This week I'm talking about this. You can actually set it up to automatically post to those social networking services every time you post a podcast. Get the word of mouth out. If you see someone, tell them, I have a podcast, you should listen. I'll show you in a moment. We have little cards that we can hand out with the podcast address on it for people to go to, and then they can listen and subscribe. Interviewing. The more people you interview, the more connections you're going to make from those people. So if you have a good customer of yours, right, who has had a successful relationship with you, you should interview them so they can say what they did, how you helped them, and how you can help the listener. Definitely networking. Through networking, you should, if you're really serious about this podcasting thing, you should attend a podcasting conference. They're all up and down the Eastern Seaboard. You know, when things start opening up again after the pandemic, there's going to be a ton more, but there's a lot of online ones happening now. Go out there, see what other podcasters are doing, see how they're making money, see how they're advertising and marketing their podcast, and how it can help you market your podcast and in turn market your business. And also, I mentioned before, the website. On your business website, you're going to want to put your podcast right down there on the homepage. And then when you connect with your audience, you want to ask them for feedback and you want to solicit reviews and interact with them, which means you're going to get criticism. That's great. That's actually fantastic. There's no bad news out there. Your bad news or your criticism or your feedback, regardless of whether or not it's good or bad, is going to be good for you, because it's going to have people coming to listen and make their own choices on what you were discussing and whether or not they agree with you or they agree with the person who feedback. And you definitely want to interact with your audience as well. These are your potential customers. You're putting your best foot forward, and at the same time, you are educating them on what you do, and you're entertaining them as well. Your podcast should not be an ad from start to finish. Your podcast should be about what you do and how it is, how it affects the world or the world around you or your community. Okay. So and I'm going to show you some examples now. There are very clever ways of advertising and marketing your business without the listener thinking that that's what you're doing. And you want to use your podcast and your personality to drive traffic to your website, your storefront, or your events. If we're having a big event here at the library, you sure as heck are going to expect that the week before that big event, that episode of the podcast is going to talk about that event. If you're having a sale, if you're going to be somewhere doing a presentation, if you're going to do anything that involves you being out and about or maybe something happening, you're going to want to mention it on the podcast, get people to come down physically to those places and make those connections from your podcast to your brick and mortar. And your podcast alone will not help build your business. It should be used as another component of your marketing plan. So this is not a replacement for your traditional marketing plan. This is an additional component of it to build it even better and to make it another outlet for you to get your business information out there. So what we do here at the library, as you can see on the screen here, is we have flyers, we have bookmarks, we have Facebook posts. So every time we put up something, if it's something special, we'll put a Facebook post. We haven't been doing that lately. We should start doing it again. We do see better numbers, obviously, when we post on our social networking. So, that right there is a great example of how important it is. We have business cards that we'll hand out to people if we're maybe at a networking event and they mention something about, oh yeah, I'm interested in what you do at the library. We give them a card, say, if you want to find out what we do and who we are, here, listen to our podcast. And in the center screen here, you could see these great bookmarks that we created. When someone comes to pick up a hold, they made a reserve at the library. We randomly put these bookmarks into the books. So they have a bookmark, and they also can have the address and the email address to the podcast. They could say, hey, we do a podcast. So you have to be clever about this kind of stuff and make it fun. Just some quick examples as we try to wrap this up here in the time allotted. I love bringing this example up because I actually got to see these guys speak. This is a business that serves lawyers. Very specific business here. They serve lawyers and law firms, but they have a podcast. They're called Unbundled Attorney. They have a podcast for lawyers. Okay. And what they do is they talk about legal issues, not about their business, but they talk about legal issues. But what they do while they're talking about legal issues is they mention, if you're interested in what we're talking about and you can see how well we know our stuff because you're listening and you appreciate our knowledge, then we can help you build your business. So for more information about Unbundled Attorney and how our exclusive unbundled leads can help grow your practice, visit this website. So you can see on the right-hand side here, this is their show notes. They talk about, okay, this is what we talked about during this episode. head over to iTunes, subscribe, Stitcher, whatever, go to our YouTube channel. And if you liked what you heard and you want to hear more and you want to see what we can do for you, give us a call. Visit our website. Fantastic means of educating their potential audience and then driving them to perhaps use their service is a really phenomenal way of doing it. Another one of my favorite, this is personally, I personally subscribe to and use this company is Dreams Unlimited Travel. I'm a huge, gigantic Disney fan, Disney cruise fan. So they are a travel agent. And guess what? They have a weekly podcast / video podcast where they record news about what's happening at Disney World and Disneyland, and news about planning your vacation, tips and tricks on how to get the most out of your, your Disney cruise. They are incredibly entertaining. They're a lot of fun, super knowledgeable. They've been doing this for over 20 years now. And it's just one big advertisement that you wouldn't guess was an advertisement because you're being entertained and educated. You're enjoying what they're saying. But at the same time, at the end of the show, hey, listen, if you want us to help, and you can see at the bottom here, it says, this is their website. At the bottom, they have their links to the shows. And then on top, if you want to get a quote, click here for a quote. It's just, this is how easy it is to work this out. Make something that people are interested in, that's in your industry. And then at the end, the little hook is, hey, if you want more information, I can help you. Okay. Here's just a local company that I found. You just fooling around yesterday, just looking for local companies, just as an example, All Island Car and Limo Service. Okay. This is a local limo company. All right. They have very short, shows here you can see. And it looks like they're doing it like maybe once a month or ish, maybe every 3 weeks. You can subscribe to that. And look, the compelling methods attempted to keep vehicles clean and safe during the COVID virus. Best things to do in West Hampton. Book a West Hampton car service. Explore the gorgeous beaches and downtowns in East Hampton with a professional car service. So these are like little shows about the subjects that we might be interested in. What's the best thing to do in West Hampton? And at the same time, it's an ad for who they are and what they do and how they can help us. It's very simple. I mean, in concept, it is very simple. Okay. In execution, it might take some work, but that's what we're here for. Finally, I just want to mention this. On the video side, during the pandemic, we did a show called Spotlight on Middle Country, where we partnered up with the local Chamber of Commerce, and we interviewed local businesses. And we did it via Zoom. And we have, again, you have the audio and the video aspect. We just use the video aspect in this case, but we can absolutely, if we wanted to, use the audio aspect. But think about that. You can interview, like I said, potential customer. Your current customer to attract potential customers. They see how well you handle your customers. Or in your industry, you can interview people who are in your industry, who are not necessarily your competition, but someone who works in your industry, and educate people on what you do, so they have a better understanding on how you can help them. It really is, like I said, in concept, it's pretty simple. We can help you with the more difficult stuff. So I just made it. I just made the hour. So I will open it up to questions. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature. And again, if you want to reach out to me or one of us here at the Miller Center, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about podcasting. My email address, stevencenzosalvatore@mcplibrary.org. If you want to listen to what our podcast sounds like, the library podcast, it's mcplpodcast.com. Again, we're a weekly podcast. You can kind of hear how we structure it. But if you're thinking of doing anything like this, and you run into any issues or you have any questions about equipment, this was meant to basically be an introduction just to get your juices flowing, to think about what you're going to need and what you should think about to start your own podcast for your business. But we can go deeper. So we'll just give it another minute. If anybody wants to put questions in the chat, and if not, then I wish you all a very fabulous rest of your Wednesday. And we will see you on the next Business Bites and our next webinar here at the Miller Business Center. Check us out, youtube.com/Miller Business Center for any other programs that we've done in the past. Take a look at those. Okay, it doesn't look like there are any questions. Again, you can reach out to me. Just drop me an email if you do have a question. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. We do greatly appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.